Okay, today's talk is going to be on Joseph. There are a lot of things about Joseph that we can talk about, and we can be here for months talking about Joseph. But Rob and I, we agreed that we're going to deal basically on the strengths and struggles that Joseph has had in his life, because they are applicable to our lives. And a lot of people say struggles that Joseph had. What kind of struggles did he have? God used this guy, and you know, he was a man after God's own heart almost, because, you know, he denied his own flesh and stayed away from this woman, and God blessed him to be the second in charge of Egypt, and he blessed the children of Israel to come, and they were prosperous, so on and so forth. But there are a lot of things that take place in this whole Joseph person, this character of Joseph, that applies into all of our lives. And Joseph was down the line in that list. He wasn't the first son, second, or third. He was around 10, 11, down on the end. But he was a favorite son of Jacob, and because of that, he got favorite treatment. Now, in that culture, you guys know very well that the first child is the one that's looked upon as something great, and everybody else down the line just falls into their place. But here the role was reversed. And because of that that treatment that Jacob gave to his son, Joseph, with good reason, caused him to have a lot of problems, a lot of issues with his brothers. Now, we have to assume that a brother isn't going to be hated by his other brothers overnight. It takes a period of time of things to happen and transpire in the lives of these individuals to dislike a brother to the point, he's only 17 years old now, to want to kill your brother. Now, they didn't set out at this moment to kill him. Joseph actually was sent, Joseph was sent out to just go and find out what's going on with his brothers. And you guys know the story, that he was thrown in a ditch when they saw him walking around with this beautiful tunic, what would you call that? The tunic?
Robe.
Like a robe.
Like
a robe. And it was a symbol of honor, you know, that they had. And it was bad enough that the brothers already hated him, but for him to be prancing around with this thing made them feel like, you know, who is this guy? So once again, Jacob and Rachel was, the parents of Joseph. He was loved by his father and hated by his brothers. Now, the sad thing about this is that I personally feel that everything could have been changed, but you know, it's very difficult when we're all from dysfunctional families. What family is not dysfunctional? And here you have a family that you got a father having children from different women, and they're actually like nomads living out in the desert somewhere, okay? And Jacob is the guy who God is talking to, revealing things through dreams, so on and so forth. And then he picks the youngest one here to be loved more. So that kind of put a scar on the kid to begin with. And then he's living his life feeling like, you know, hey, I'm the favorite kid, you know, I got the silver spoon in my mouth. And then the brothers are disliking him, and they wind up hating him. And that's the point that we get to, where he's a little arrogant with this, you know. He may not even realize he's arrogant, but it's just something that's in his own nature. And he's still a person who loves God, but he still has that. Just like us, we love God, but we have issues in our own lives that may cause us to be a little arrogant at times. And that arrogance caused him to be thrown in the ditch and left for dead. How many times God hasn't rescued us in situations in our lives because of the way we act in our flesh, okay? And to make matters worse, the brothers were going back to get him to kill him, okay? No, to trade him off, but somebody else came around.
So when the Midianite merchants came by, his brothers pulled Joseph out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels. So again, this says that the brothers pulled him out and sold him to the Midianites. Then there was another version that said that it wasn't the brothers. So I don't know if there's some pastor, maybe you can jump in here. Who pulled him out of the well? NIV says that the brothers did, but then we've read other versions that said
New
the
American
Midianites.
Standard says that the Midianites did.
Yeah. Not to put you on the spot.
Probably both of them did. It was
Okay.
Reuben. Reuben probably said pull him out, and then the Midianites probably physically pulled him out. But it was at the brothers' authority.
Okay.
They were
Thank
probably
you,
in
sir.
conjunction, so.
Both are right. Thank you, sir.
There you go. So just taking a couple steps back, going back to the dreams part. Remember that Joseph, he interpreted two dreams that he had. The first one was when he told his brothers that they were going to be bowing down to him. The second dream actually upset his father, and his father rebuked him, because it said that his father and the mother was going to be bowing down to him. So his father actually, so you can see the dysfunctional part there adding into everything, which led to him being thrown into the pit and then winding up being sold into slavery. The beautiful thing about this, though, is that God's hand is always at work. God is in control of your lives regardless of the situation, the decisions that you make in your life. It doesn't matter which way you go, God's will for your life is going to be fulfilled one way or another. It can either be the easy way or the hard way. And here we can see that Joseph is having a hard time in his life at this time. And he's only 17 years old. Now he gets sold to Potiphar over in Egypt, and he winds up being blessed there because everything he touches is prospering. Regardless of what he does, it all prospers. And a period of time is taking place now, and they're seeing this happening in his life, where whatever he touches prospers. So they make him in charge of everything there, and he's in charge of everything. He can do whatever he wants to do. There's only one thing he can't do, is just be with Potiphar's wife. And that one thing that he couldn't do is what the enemy used to attack him, which is basically how it happens in our lives. You know, we can be walking around and doing a great thing, and God is blessing us. And that one little thing, that little insignificant thing in our lives just comes, and they push that button, and everything gets crazy in our lives. And here is another example as to what happened to Joseph. Now, you got to realize too, hey, what's up, brother? You got to realize too that in his life at this point in time, he was the special kid back in the day. He got thrown into this pit. Now he's over in Potiphar's house, and everything he's touching is turning to gold pretty much. So he's got to have a little pride in him here now, saying, look, you know, look at what I'm doing, looking at himself instead of focusing on God, even though he lived a God-centered type life. And that pride that he had comes into play in chapter 40 for us when he's interpreting a dream, because he winds up getting locked up, we all know, and he gets put in prison where he prospers again. You know, here he is. He gets thrown into a pit. He winds up being the head of Potiphar's household. And he winds up getting locked up because Potiphar's wife falsely accuses him of having relations with him, okay? Because perhaps, you know, he should have taken some steps in that situation in Potiphar's house that he could have avoided certain things. But it didn't. So therefore, he wound up being locked up in prison. And here, God makes him in charge of the prisoners in prison. He's in charge of them. Only God can take the mistakes that you make in your lives and turn them around for his good that way. Only he can do that, especially when you're focusing on God in your life. Because we're all going to make mistakes. There is no one perfect. Only Christ was perfect. And despite that, those imperfections, God can use you to do the things in your life. That's what Be the Man is all about, to help each other out when we are in that pit. Instead of being sold into slavery to sin, we're going to be sold into slavery to Christ. Because Rob will reach his hand out and he'll pull you out of that pit. If you wind up being falsely accused of something in life, regardless where it is, whether it's in the business world or whatever, and you wind up getting locked up, or you wind up it doesn't even have to be a prison cell. It could just be a prison in your own life because all hell broke loose. That's what Be the Man is here for, to help each other out. Instead of being put into a prison where you're going to be locked up, God can bless you in those situations. But if you don't reach out, you're not going to get the help. And here Joseph had an opportunity to reach out to God again, and he actually reaches out to a cupbearer because he answers two more dreams, one to the cupbearer and one to the baker, who wind up being thrown in prison because Pharaoh was upset with them. They wind up down there. Some time goes by, and Joseph discerns that these guys are saddened. They're sad about something. He doesn't know what, and he asked them, and they said that they had a dream, each of them, and they both explained the dream, and he interpreted their dreams. And then here goes God's gift. We're all blessed with some type of gift in our lives, whether we're a businessman, a contractor, whatever it is that we do. God has blessed us with something. We need to use the blessings that God has given us for his glory, not for James's glory. I have to use the talents that he's given me to glorify God, not to glorify myself so everybody can say, oh, look, there goes James. No, it's for God's glory, so that they can say, there goes God, there goes Jesus. You know, it's not about me, it's all about him. And we need to do that too. And here, when he deciphers those two dreams to the cupbearer and the baker is the one who's going to get his head chopped off. And the cupbearer is going to wind up finding favor in Pharaoh's heart. And what does Joseph do? He bends down, he asks the guy, hey, don't forget me. When you're up there next to Pharaoh, don't forget me. Instead of counting on God, here he is counting on human beings. When God is the one that saw him through all the problems he's had up to this point. And Lord knows there are a lot of problems in his life. And what happens when he put his trust in man? He spent 2 more years in prison because the guy forgot about him. How many times don't we trust in people and they let us down? We have to focus on God and live a God-centered life and allow God to bless us and allow God to prune us, because there are going to be times that God is going to prune us. That goes back to John 15 when Christ is talking about the vine. You know, the pruning that God does is going to produce something good, a fruit. but the sins that we commit are going to produce something bad, bitter fruit. And that's how you can judge the differences in our lives. So if in your life you're going through some type of problem, some type of trial, you can taste the fruit. If the fruit is bitter, then it ain't about God. It must be some type of sin in the life that's in there that's causing those problems. If it's God, this fruit will be sweet because it will produce it. Because that's how God ultimately works. So going here to chapter 42, verse 8. 42, verse 8. This is my favorite part here. Me and Rob were having a little tug of war with this part. It's the lie part of Joseph. Joseph, in this area here, he has his brothers sent to Egypt to buy grain because he winds up being the second guy to Pharaoh in Egypt. Why? Because he deciphers a dream for Pharaoh that nobody else could decipher. Pharaoh has a dream that God obviously gave him, and no one can decipher it. This is when the cupbearer finally remembers Joseph and says to the Pharaoh, there's a guy in jail who deciphered my dream. Let's call upon him to decipher the dream. He deciphers the dream, becomes the second guy in charge. So he has all this grain. He answers Pharaoh's dream. We all know about the dream about the famine that's going to come, so on and so forth, the 7 years of prosperous and the 7 years of famine. And the brothers are coming from Canaan to come purchase grain because they have no grain there. And Joseph happens to be the guy in that position to bless these guys. Now, in this period of time, there had to be about 11 to 13 years that has transpired in Joseph's life since the time he was thrown into the pit. 11 to 13 years has transpired. And here his brothers come, and he recognizes his brothers that come in front of him and say, hey, we want to buy grain. So they didn't recognize him because he was probably dressed up like one of those Egyptians with makeup and everything and curls and all that other stuff. But he recognized them. And he did not go to them as their brother. He actually lied during the whole period of time, and he said that they were spies, and he goes on through that whole process, which goes to show that arrogance, that pridefulness that's in Joseph, okay? Because if he really was brokenhearted for his brothers, in this 13 years that passed by, he would have looked for his mother and father. He would have sent for somebody. When he was at Potiphar's house, he was the second guy to Potiphar. He didn't have to go himself. It was only about a 300-mile journey from where he was and where his parents were. He could have sent somebody at any point in time, but he chose not to. Then he winds up getting locked up, and now he's second in charge in Egypt, and he never reached out to his mother or father that he's so close that he loved. I could understand the brothers, but what about the mother and the father? And what does he do? He does ask the brothers, do you guys have a father? And then they say, yes, he's well, so on and so forth, blah, blah, blah. He goes through that whole process. But the fact of the matter is that one of the struggles in Joseph's life was his own pridefulness, because he was only thinking about himself. When he was second in command of Egypt, he controlled everything. But yet his family were out there somewhere, living their lives. How many times don't we become successful in something and forget about everybody else? Because it's all about us. We can't live our lives centered around ourselves. It has to be a Christ-centered life so that God can bless us and bless all the people around us. That's what Be the Man is all about. That's what Redeemer is all about. It's all about having a Christ-centered life. And if we were to have a Christ-centered life, then all the things that we have in our lives will be a blessing to everyone, because everything would just shine out instead of coming towards us. So those are one of the things that I struggled with Rob about, because we were like, oh, Joseph is this. He's like an example of Jesus Christ because of this and that. Says, yeah, but Joseph had issues. Because how did he honor his mother and his father after 13 years of being away, when he had the opportunity not even to just go, but to send someone to go and get them? He never did that. If he truly forgave his brothers, he would have forgiven when he was at Potiphar's house. But he did tell his brothers, look, God, eventually at the end, he tells them that God has brought me to Egypt to save you guys. But see, this is God working despite our imperfections. Also, the blessing of being able to interpret dreams is one of the gifts that God gave Joseph, and discernment that he had with the baker and the cupbearer. God is going to bless you guys. He blesses me. I see it, I feel it, and I love it. But am I going to use the gifts that God has given me to prosper me, so that I can have the biggest house on the block, have the nicest car, new watch every other week, and whatever the case is? Or am I going to glorify God with those talents? You can sing, you can paint, you can carpentry, whatever you do, and you can prosper. Or can God be glorified in that? Doesn't matter where you are. My brother's leaving us now. He's going back to Indianapolis, right? You can shine in Indianapolis with Christ, brother. Take the message that you received here and that you received in the small groups, that you received here from your example from your brother, and just take it on with you and allow Christ to shine through your life up in Indianapolis. It gets cold up there, so you got to let that shine, bro. Melt that snow. And then the forgiveness and mercy part of Joseph, you know, in chapter 45 through 50. Yeah, eventually he did forgive his brothers. Yes, he did. He cried out. His father did come to him afterwards, and he ran out. He got into a chariot, he met him, and he embraced him, and he cried, and he cried, and he cried. Yeah, there was probably some anger in there and some bitterness because of what happened. Yeah, I think back to my childhood, and there are things I wish didn't happen the way it did. But despite what happened to me in my past, God can still use me today to shine for Christ. And he can do it to all of us. We've all had issues. We can all point back somewhere and say, if this didn't happen to me, and if my mama didn't do this, and if my daddy didn't do this, or my uncle, or whoever, we can all do that. But God will take those times and still make something good out of it. If you'll allow him and not whine over it. It's in the past, it's gone. Let it go. I want to cry now. One of the hardest things that I had to do was forgive my father, because he wasn't a father. But until I forgave him, the blessings couldn't flow. It was like things in the river stopping the flow, you know? It was just stopping the flow, and it just made like rapids in life. I was angry, and I was bitter. And I didn't realize I was hurting myself. Until one day God said, you gotta let it go. You gotta let it go. And I couldn't do it. I said, I ain't letting it go. That guy was no good. I used to call him a sperm donor. He wasn't no dad, I had a sperm donor. But God made it happen because I truly wanted it to happen. And because I couldn't do it, I asked God to do it. And he did it. He removed it from me and allowed the blessings to flow. Man, what a beautiful God we have. That he can take the hardest parts of our lives and make them smell like roses. All you have to do is submit your life to Christ and allow him to take over. Just let him take over. Get in the passenger seat and let him drive and enjoy the ride. Oh, what a blessing. Blessings just flow every day, and the air smells sweet regardless what truck you're driving behind. Everything is just rosy and beautiful. And despite how hard life gets, you still have a peace inside of you that surpasses all understanding, because you're not in control, and you're not in control, and you're not in control. Christ is in control, and he will fill you with his peace. A peace that Joseph understood despite himself. A peace that we can all understand despite ourselves. Allow him to reign in your lives. Let go. And let God be God in your lives. Because that's what it's all about. What else matters when it's all said and done, you know? What else matters? It's just Christ, brother. So let go. Basically, that's the message that I had today from Joseph, wanting to apply his struggles and his strengths in our lives, because we all have struggles. And we all have strengths. I don't care who you are. Don't think less of yourself, because God don't make junk. You are somebody special, because God made you for a reason and a purpose in life. Figure out whatever it is and run with them, man. Don't let the enemy rob you of your joy, because that's what he wants to do. He wants to rob you of your joy and focus on the things that really don't matter. And the things that really matter, we just forget about, which is Christ. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Amen.